slightly over time, so I'm already running down the clock. Good day, and welcome to Streamlining Software Management with Chocolatey. Before we begin, if you haven't already met me, please let me introduce myself. I'm James Ruskin. I come from Cambridge in the UK. Over the last several years, I've been a DevOps engineer, a sysadmin, and a general advocate for having fun with PowerShell. Currently, I'm a solutions engineer at Chocolatey Software, which means that I get to lurk at the side of slide decks more often than not. And if you've met me before, you probably know that I'm both sorry, nervous, a lot, and I'm trying to be better about those things. So to add to that, when I'm sorry or nervous, I have a horrible habit of speaking much faster than I should. So though I intend to go through these slides fairly quickly and get to what were going to be some demos, as has been said very nicely in this conference, if I'm going too fast, please just slow me down. I'm not going to be offended at all. Wave, something like that. I'll try and slow down. So, to get into it. Oh, yeah, there we go. We're here to talk about the fun challenges brought up by trying to manage lots of different software on lots of different endpoints. When we think about it, we like to break that down into three sectors. First up, in technical terms, the amount of software we need to manage has grown staggeringly over the last few years. And in these fun times, software is updated more frequently than ever before, be it to add cool new features, new visual stylings, or just to address good old vulnerabilities. So I think that graph there is probably just demonstrative and not actually linked to any figures, but it's fair to say that the amount of time that you could spend patching environments and installing patches could grow hugely. And by default, it wouldn't be all that much fun to deal with, in my opinion. This is because I, like many, particularly here in a PowerShell conference, find that repeating a next install process a dozen times, or even just coordinating it with people, can be, frankly, boring as heck. My first introduction to PowerShell, and Chocolatey, in fact, were down to me trying to script away the boring and predictable points of help desk and admin tasks, setting up users or installing software to fresh OS images, even if we don't like gold images in the crowd. So you can imagine the joy I had as a team of one when I found that I could hit enter and step away, do other work, and the result would be predictable and good most every time. That wasn't initially with Chocolatey, but it came on to become so. Of course, when I was trying to do all that myself, I'd find myself searching bizarre corners of the internet for unusual silent installation tips, just really weird forums, and then trying to find the most appropriate installer, test it all together, and hope it would work. It's actually a shockingly high number of ways that folk distribute software. Everything from zipped binaries to install shield to squirrel installer. Yeah. And if you ask someone to install something, how would they find that installer? Similar to me, would they search random websites with millions of download icons just sitting there worryingly? And on top of that, Windows has a lot of different types of installers and ways to install stuff. So at the end of the day, there's just a million ways that if you ask somebody to install a piece of software, they could go around trying to do that. And maybe you want to restrict that down. So there's a lot of different questions you'd have to answer before you can reliably deploy a piece of software as you want. So with that all said, how do we suggest you go ahead? Well, we've got a universal packaging format that we essentially wrap anything that you want to install in, so that whatever it is, you have got a predictable way of storing the installation and distributing it. Whether you're managing native installers, zips, scripts, binaries, or in-house developed applications, we've probably got it covered, along with some examples, or even probably a working package on the community repository. If you haven't seen the community repository, it's a website that we have at community.chocolatey.org/packages, where we have over 10,000 unique packages as of 11:53, and just a shy of 2.4 billion total downloads by the community members. So that's pretty awesome. There's a lot of examples there for software that you may want to install already. And we've got a load of tools that we can actually help you take packages from there to use. So to roll back, you'll see we've got the slightly pithy write once, deploy anywhere with anything, and then track and manage it, written on the side there. That pretty much sums up what we suggest as a business. In short, you can quickly create a package, either using standard methods that you may already be familiar with from Chocolatey CLI, or with tools like Package Builder, which is something that we'll talk about today, or by using one of the 10,000 odd packages we have on the Chocolatey community repository and just internalizing it. You can deploy it to just about any Windows system. We can go into the exact details for which ones are compatible, but it's safe to say that, well, it's accurate to say that if it's in support, it'll work. And you can use just about any configuration management or deployment technology that you have to deploy that package. And then we'd suggest tracking the versions that you have deployed and ensuring they're updated when you think they are. So as it happens, we even offer a bit of a solution for that last bit. So what is it we actually offer? We didn't actually bring any chocolate to our booth this year, I'm afraid, although we do have lots of T-shirts. So if you want 1, 2, 3, 10 T-shirts, come see us, please. But yeah, we've got a wide selection of components that we'd like to tell people about. As I say, some of them you might be familiar with. We're not going to go too deep into the ones you probably are. But on the left, we can see Chocolatey CLI and Chocolatey GUI. Those are available for use by anyone. They're fully open source, and they're excellent. We're going to go a little more into what they do, but not terribly deeply in a second. In the middle, we have Chocolatey license extension and Chocolatey GUI license extension, which predictably go with the licensing. They add a selection of fun new features that we are going to dip into to the open source products. And on the right, we've got Chocolaty Agent and Chocolatey Central Management, or CCM for short, which are the components that allow you to further control, automate, and report on the software within your domain. As you might expect from the naming, the license and management components are part of what we know as Chocolatey for Business. So let's dive into those bits, as people may not have heard about them. You are probably aware of Chocolatey CLI. It was originally created by Rob Reynolds back in 2011. It was the package manager for Windows at the time, and we'd still like to call it that. More recently, a team of awesome folk have been working hard on improving it, and we finally reached a 1.0 release last year. 2.0 came this year, so our release cadence over the last decade has really gone up. It's quite obviously the backbone for just about everything in the Chocolatey product suite. Everything else is built around or on top of this. Chocolatey GUI is the portion of this that makes it easier for folk who aren't comfortable with command line interface. It's over the CLI and allows you to configure just about anything you can do with Chocolatey. You're quite likely to be happy typing choco install into your terminal, but for anyone who isn't, this is the friendlier experience. It features big clickable icons, TM, and is great for what we term self-service management. So the GUI exposes all the packages you've made available to a system and allows folk to install them. In combination with the background agent that we're going to talk about in a second, you can even allow users without elevation or permissions to install traditionally hard-to-install applications, which we'll come back to in a second. Adding to the CLI and general tools, we've got the license extension, which includes Package Builder, which we'll demonstrate, which we won't demonstrate shortly. We may demonstrate shortly, which allows you to use the GUI to generate a package based on the identification that we get from the installer. So we've got some identification technology that looks at it and tries to make a best guess of what it can be, and then set up a package appropriately. It's got several features designed to improve the security and reliability of your individual deployments and endpoints by internalizing and testing packages, and more features to help control your environment as a whole. Additionally, if you're interested in Intune functionality, deploying via Intune, managing via Intune, that's also part of this extension. So in this case, obviously, if you're I'm sorry, I should repeat the question. The question was, what do I mean by internalization? Because I haven't defined that yet. In this case, packages on the Chocolatey community repository are often referring to external binaries. So it'll just be a link to an installer or a file. This is sometimes due to licensing issues or distribution rights. But in general, what we suggest, if you want to use it internally and you want to use it internally reliably, what you should do is you should take that package and essentially download the binary within the package, as it's essentially an archive, and then modify the package so it points to that internal file. This means that your package will be completely reliable when you download it from your internal repository, which is helpful. Is that right? Cool. Sorry. I should also say, sorry, I thought I put a slide in for this, but if there are any questions, please do feel free to just chime in, because, well, this is a mildly interactive presentation at least. So, and any questions that are asked, I think we have a couple of Chocolatey Pro licenses that we're happy to give out at the end. That's correct. The question was, so for synchronization to Intune, do you need the Chocolatey license that we provide here? And the answer is yes. We also have a GUI extension, which is relatively new and contains the ability to customize your GUI experience a little. So there's some organizational branding stuff there. And it also adds some features around ensuring that configuration is correct for your users. Chocolaty Agent is where I start to get pretty excited, which probably says a little bit too much about me, if I'm honest. First up, as mentioned earlier, this allows you to have users who don't have permissions to trigger an install or upgrade to trigger an install or upgrade, which is pretty fantastic. Further, you can restrict the sources they can install from. So you're only allowing software that's come from your approved repositories. So you have these internalized repositories, and you're able to say that users can only grab software from there. And stuff that you've approved and arguably tested. So this eliminates some of that worry from sourcing software from random sites, etc. This works with both the GUI and the command line. So users can use whichever they feel comfortable with, or you can trigger deployments remotely. And you can actually configure this to only allow some operations. As I said, install and upgrade are there by default, but folk can also use uninstall if they want to uninstall packages that they've installed, or if you want to give them permission to other packages too. And of course, it is the glue that checks into Chocolatey Central Management, the server portion of this. That's what we're about to come to next. So, the server allows for both visibility and reporting on the state of your environment, shows you which packages are outdated, and exactly what's installed. You can easily see how, yes. No. So you can certainly use Intune for all of the management portion of this and use Chocolatey packages. Repeating the question, is this required for, is CCM required if you are using Intune as your deployment stuff? I'd argue that you don't need it, but it is certainly nice. I think some folk I've talked to have certainly said that CCM is in some ways a nicer method of doing some of this stuff. So certainly tracking and deploying, it's very friendly, which I'll come to in a second. So Chocolaty Agent would be talking back to CCM. Intune's agent is just talking to Intune. But Intune would be used to deploy the actual package. So the question was, can you use CCM to bridge to SCCM and show all the packages you currently have installed in CCM in SCCM?
No, technically the general packages immediately to providers also that end users we call the packages in the SCCM we have like using SCCM to install.
Right. I'm actually unsure, but yes. Thank you. Sorry. So the answer to whether you can show Chocolatey packages and deploy Chocolatey packages in SCCM via SCCM is yes. Thank you. I'm sorry, I should be tracking who's asking questions so that I can do the thing at the end with the licenses. So, central management, not essential if you have other systems in place for it, but quite nice nonetheless. We'll go into that in a second. You can see what's installed. You can easily see how deployments are going. And you can trigger both simple Chocolatey package deployments and more complex arbitrary PowerShell deployments. And obviously the possibilities there are pretty much endless. You can do just about anything with PowerShell. So what we're kind of recommending then is something that looks a little bit like this. You have, you bring packages from another source, you internalize them, test them, store them on your repository server, and then use Chocolatey Central Management or another tool of your choice to deploy them across your endpoints. It might seem like there's a lot of effort there to deploy all that, and maybe you don't need all those services, but we've spent a fair amount of time simplifying that process. We've got scripts available for deploying everything you need to VMs. We've got Ansible playbooks on the way, and we've got this particular diagram, which is a replica of the Chocolatey for Business Azure environment, which is an Azure application that can be deployed in a few clicks and contains just about everything you need to try or use Chocolatey for Business. As we showed in the previous diagram, it contains a VM running Chocolatey Central Management, a Jenkins instance for automating the package internalization or testing, etc., and a NuGet repository using Sonatype Nexus for storing all of your internalized packages. And it all deploys that in about half an hour, arguably, which sounds like a long time, but at the same time, the actual effort there is minimal. So I've actually got one of those stood up, and we were going to do some demos, but sadly, I chose my slide poorly, and everything's gone sideways. So I'll demonstrate quite what I'm talking about, but it's not going to be quite as fun as it might have been. And I'm going to have to deal with some fun resolution changes. So as you can see, we've got a deployed environment here, both with CCM, Jenkins, and Nexus repository. We've essentially, on kicking this off, it kicked off internalization of a bunch of packages so that we pulled them from the Chocolatey community repository and license repository, pulled them down, internalized them, put them in a test repository, which we can see up here, which then has a production repository job, which essentially, after testing has been completed, you can promote those to the production repository. We sadly essentially leave the testing up to the user because environments vary. We can't really say, here's the perfect solution for you. There's sections for that. Once that's happened, you're free to go into Chocolatey Central Management, at which point you can basically check out what computers you have available, see which packages have been available, what packages are outdated. As you can see here, we have a couple of outdated packages, and what is available to be updated based on the repositories that you have available on that machine. And if you have many machines, many groups, then you would be able to essentially deploy updates via this method. As it is, we can show that we have a selection of packages and we have some updates that I can deploy and then have fun with. So if we create a generic deployment that I'm going to imagine if we call generic deployment, and add in our Choco server here. Choco server in this case is the actual instance that is running the rest of the services. The part of the demos that went wrong was my external machine that was supposed to check in. So we are currently using this machine. And we will see what will likely be a delightful failure of a deployment. So we can create a basic deployment here, add a step and suggest it that we name it something like upgrade package, at which point we can do pretty much anything you can imagine with Chocolatey. If by anything you can imagine, you want some of the basic commands, so install upgrades and uninstalls. They're all pretty easy. But if, for example, we wanted to uninstall... Oh, okay. If we wanted to install Firefox, for example, which is a better example here, then we could do so. And we have a couple of options, but nothing too advanced. This is, as I said, a basic deployment. We can then pop in, select our groups, and you can generate groups in a variety of ways. We've got a good API that will allow you to set up groups and maintain them appropriately. Sorry, the question was, does it support integration with AD groups? You can maintain group membership with AD groups, but I think there is a little extra step that you have to take. Yeah. So if we save that. ready, then we'll see that that should kick off at some point in the near future. Oh, sorry, if I click run now, it'll kick off roughly now. At this point, Chocolaty Agent basically polls the server every so often, checks in, sees if there are any active deployments, and then pulls down the requested stuff. While that's waiting to happen, I'm just going to create an advanced deployment to demonstrate what's going on there. And of course, you can schedule these deployments as well. But if you want to do something more complex, as you may in here, then you can have an advanced deployment that will allow you to both run arbitrary code and add in sensitive variables. So if you wanted to, say, check into an API, yes? The question was, do you need a repository of some kind? And if so, yeah. Yeah, so we work with a wide variety of repository types. Most of the ones we use or suggest are NuGet v2 or v3. NuGet v3 is actually new to Choco 2.0, but you can also use stuff like essentially a file share or even a local folder. So, you know, but you can do very interesting things with this. As you can imagine, anything you can do in PowerShell, you can do here. And you can store sensitive variables to be passed down and deployed in a vaguely secure way. I'm sorry, I should also mention that I use a lot of very, very hedgy language, such as vaguely. Secure way. Let's just go with the secure way. Can anybody provide me with an example of something that we'd like to deploy to the server that wouldn't be terrifying? Firefox. We've just done that one. Yeah. Okay. VS Code. Let's see if I've got it in the repository. We do. No, we don't. Git. Yeah, good choice. Although this is, you know, essentially a basic install at this point, so let's just do that anyway. So, you know, you can essentially do anything. You can pass in parameters. I don't think Git one has any parameters, but let's give it a null parameter, imaginary. And as I say, you can choose variables that are sensitive, which will be stored elsewhere. So it does all the normal stuff you'd expect. And then you can run that deployment as well. You can even schedule it. And I suppose if I put in a schedule of 2 minutes from now, 1 minute from now, not sure what time it's going to be. Then we'll be able to demonstrate that. You can also repeat stuff and restrict schedules to a maintenance window, which is handy when you have, for example, a selection of user PCs that you would like to install updates nicely or deploy software before they come into work, but after the machine's been woken. Again, if we move that already, then we should see that deploy, and we can hopefully see one that's sort of completed. So with luck, if we go and have a look at our VM with all of its lovely, lovely errors, then we can see that we have Firefox, which is great. Yes. I think I did mention there was a little bit of a fire with the demos, but I'm happy to elaborate again that, yes, my demos all broke slightly before I came in here. And yeah, they weren't happy with me. Alfred. So the question was, what would happen if the endpoints that you're trying to deploy to weren't available at the time of deployment? The answer to that is that they would continue to check in as soon as they did become available, and assuming that the deployment wasn't in a restricted schedule, it would attempt to deploy it as soon as it found the deployment. So there's the features of, for example, Package Builder, which is an application that you get when you install the Chocolatey extension. Sorry, let me repeat the question briefly, and then I shall address it. So the question was, are there ways, you mentioned earlier, there were ways to automatically fill out a package based on the install. And yes, so there is something within Package Builder which allows you to generate a package automatically based on various things that we can see within the installer. I can... Oh yeah, so this, it doesn't lock down in any way. Sorry, the question there was, packages are still editable or addable? And the answer is yes. You have a Chocolatey package, you can absolutely unpack that, modify it, and repack it, and push it any way you like to your heart's content. There's nothing stopping you doing that. And in fact, I'm actually going to zoom out unless anybody has complaints, just briefly. Right. So we can see that the package here should have, with any luck, Firefox setup in here, and with any luck, we're going to be able to show Package Builder by creating a Chocolatey package. So this is the GUI we were talking about earlier, which happens to be called Package Builder. You can see that it's identified, well, we've told it about Firefox. We're able to say don't embed it, so the embedding is the internalization that we mentioned earlier. And it will try, if we say generate, to create a package out of that. Of course, this is fairly generic. And I'm on my non-admin account. Which is interesting. Run away from that. With, for example, the C4B, Chocolatey for Business Azure environment, we, of course, randomize all the passwords we can within an inch of their existence, which is handy. But if we just repeat that here, then we should be able to see that we can, again, create, with luck, a package in the same place, which will then build itself. And we could have specified to not internalize that. We could have specified to store the binaries in another location. So if you wanted to, for example, have some of the a very large package that contained some enormous piece of software or data, you could have that stored in another repository or another UNC path location on the network somewhere, and you could then reference that as packages on the CCR do, which will mean that if you have, for example, no code in your install script, you can check to see if the stuff's installed, and then only download the file if it's required, which will speed some stuff up. Manfred. I think something that people have been talking about. Thank you. Is there a business plan for outsourcing the creation of the packages? I think people have been talking about that for a while. I don't know if I can. I don't know if there's. Chocolatey do, of course, offer professional services, which is something that, yeah, where we can essentially come in and help you out with packages or infrastructure or anything relating to Chocolatey for Business, and make sure that folk have packages that work. Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name of the software you mentioned. So if, sorry. I'll have to admit, I'm not familiar with it. If you'd like to pop over the booth afterwards, I'm happy to chat through it a little more concisely. That was yeah, sorry, I guess there's no point in repeating the question if I don't have the answer. Sorry. I think we've gone over the time allotted, although I started late, for non-questions. Are there any other questions? I have a few lecture slides at the end just to wrap things up. Keith. Yes, absolutely. Dependencies are inherently included in the NuGet package format, if you will, in the new spec specifically. So the question was, is there a way, sorry, is there a way to ensure that you have dependencies installed beforehand, e.g. if package A depended on package B, could you ensure that package B was installed before package A was? And the answer is yes. Yeah. Any other questions before I wrap up? Okay, fantastic. As I say, sorry about the fire. So why would I suggest you use Chocolatey for Business versus Chocolatey open source? You're probably thinking, I'm pretty good at PowerShell. I can probably do all that myself, write internalization, write things to test and deploy stuff across your fleet of machines. I'd argue that, though, you can absolutely do just about everything there that we've talked about and more. We've spent a lot of time writing these tools for people to make their organizational usage easier. Obviously, you can re-implement the wheel, but though that's fun, you'd probably spend a lot more time doing that than you would talking to us about it. And we offer support for trickier, fun issues, such as the services we mentioned earlier. So that'll hopefully save you some time and effort, which is pretty much the baseline hope we have for anyone using Chocolatey. And if you do want to get more into it, then all of those features can be used separately to whatever extent you want. You don't have to take the entire package and use it, as you say. You can use whatever deployment solution you want, whatever management solution you want. We just have some stuff that we like and are proud of. So if you do have any other questions after this, please come talk to us. We're available in all the places online, and both me and Paul, who's at the front here, feeding me very nice questions. I'll be very happy to chat at the booth or around the conference in general. Question from Paul. Of course, and anyone who has asked a question, very welcome. If you pop over to the booth in a second, we'll either, depending on how many of you there are, either take your names and send licenses out to you, or randomize the names who are there and send licenses out to you. If that's all right, because we have some Chocolatey Pro licenses, which will allow you to use some of these tools, for example, the package builder, but not SCCM in this case, and play around with that. So thank you all very much for putting up with that. Thank you very much for your time, and have a lovely day.